Okay, let's get started. So if you're passionate about search, which obviously is the case, it's a good day because this morning there are 3 talks about search and developers and extensibility. So that's the good place to be, and there's 2 more interesting sessions today. My name is Nicolas Moreau. I work on the search team, on the Microsoft search team. Our team is building the backend that powers Microsoft Search. This is an effort that has been started about 2 to 3 years ago to kind of declutter searches from the workloads and elevate search to a high level so that we use signals that happens in the different workloads to get search into a better place. I'm going to talk today about why we are introducing a new API and why are we doing that. We're going to talk about the capabilities, what is this API provide. There's going to be a bunch of demos, and then I'm going to give some perspective on what is coming next. So this is just the high-level marketing overview of what Microsoft Search is. I will not dive too much into that, but what you need to understand is our team has actually built the backend that power these experiences. That's great. But if you're a developer, you don't have access to that. All the demos that Satya has been showing where you get intelligence, where you get the great relevance, you don't have access to this today. You have access to some other search endpoint, and we'll come back to this, but you don't have access to that. So that's what we've been deciding to do is, OK, let's make this available to developers. So one question to all of you guys, since you're familiar with search, how many of you, please raise hands if you are using one of the existing search API in the Microsoft ecosystem? Graph, SharePoint, Outlook. OK, good. So then why are we doing that? Why are we introducing a new search endpoint? So the first reason is we wanted to have one single unified API that will be able to support all the different workloads. What I mean by workload is SharePoint, Outlook, Teams. Today, things are very specific to each workload, and we want to have something that provides, that can be elevated and can support all the different workloads. The second thing is, as I said in the beginning, intelligence is not coming from the workload itself. It's built in kind of a middle tier that looks at signal across different endpoints. So it's looking in Outlook, who are your colleagues? With Outlook, we are building the graph of who are the colleagues you interact with, which is not an information we get necessarily access in the Active Directory. On SharePoint, we get freshness of file. What are the files ingested? What are the files updated? What are the files that have been shared with you? And this is helping us to actually power intelligence in Microsoft Search. And therefore, this API will surface this intelligence. And the last scenario is to enable what I call multi-entity search. Instead of saying, oh, I want emails or I want files, this API will provide a way to say, oh, I had a conversation with someone about this topic, and we will be able to return email message and probably Teams chat or Teams conversations. It's now our time starts to be split more and more across Teams and Outlook. So that's kind of the reason why we decided to surface a new endpoint. So what are we releasing? So we've released this at the beginning of the week. So we are releasing a new endpoint in the Microsoft Graph. For those who are not familiar with the Microsoft Graph, it's kind of a confusing word. There's the concept of a graph of relationship. That's not what we're talking about. The Microsoft Graph API is a set of API that lets you access Microsoft 365 data. You can enumerate things, enumerate file, enumerate email, and you can search. So that's what we're surfacing here. The API will enable you to execute search scope by entity. You can say, I want to get message, I want to get files, I want to get other stuff. The interesting thing is, if you are a graph developer, you may have some UX today that understand the graph entities, that understand what a message is, what a drive item is. Drive item is the abstraction from a file. If this is the case, this search API will return you this type of entity. So if you already have some code that is able to bound this entity into UX or into some custom logic, search will give you these entities. And the last thing is all the filtering capabilities that you may be using, for example, today in SharePoint on files. This API you will keep being able to use that because actually under the cover, we are going to SharePoint to actually get the file. So all the filtering capabilities are something that are available today. So that's the high-level capabilities. And what are the type of entities that are being exposed today? So primarily collaboration around message and calendar. That's one. The second part is files, coming from SharePoint and OneDrive. And the last one is connectors. And I will drill down a little bit on connectors. I'll give the quick overview of what connectors is, because in my demo, I'd like you to get a good understanding of what's happening under the cover. So for connectors, what we have done is we have acknowledged the fact that all the data is not in Microsoft 365, A, and B, we've heard from customers, hey, I get data somewhere else. My people are searching in Microsoft 365, but I want to get this data in the search experience. So what customers are doing is mostly they are doing some custom weight search pages, and if they have a ServiceNow instance, they will get the Microsoft Search 365 results, and then they will get a specific web part or whatever, a specific integration that is going to query ServiceNow or whatever line of business system. So it means that each customer has to build something. So we wanted to solve that problem. So what we are enabling is we are enabling you to actually take this external data and bringing this data into the Microsoft Search index. So I'm very specific. We're bringing this data into the index. The data will remain in the data source. If it's an external file share, the master copy will remain in the external file share. We are just populating the Microsoft Search index. So there are 3 ways you can do that. Microsoft is providing some built-in connectors, 5 of those. File share, ServiceNow, these are kind of the canonical example, and this was also a way for us to prove this and to get us to build something solid. So we have 5 built-in connectors that I'm going to show you. Partners are building a full ecosystem of connectors with some Confluence, Jira, SAP, there might be multiple ones. And the last one, we're exposing an API to build your own. So if you have your own line of business application very specific to you, you could very well be building your own connector. So once you've built connectors, the content is available in the Microsoft Search experience. But what if you want to you have a custom app, what if you have a custom app and you want this data to be showing up in your custom app? This is where the new Search API enters into the game, because this new Search API lets you access this data that you've ingested into the Microsoft Search Index. So now you've got programmatic access to this data. So let me walk you through some demos on this. OK, so first thing I want to say is all I'm going to show you is documented, is available online. So this is the documentation for the Microsoft Search API and Graph. If you go in the Graph reference, you will see that Search is marked as a preview because it's still under beta. But anything I'm going to demo is available. Another thing is Graph Explorer, and this is the new version of Graph Explorer. So for those who are not familiar, Graph Explorer is kind of the easy client to kind of play and interact with this API. It's very easy. Instead of reading the documentation, go to Graph Explorer, run some queries, and you can get the JSON payload. And it's really a very convenient way to understand that. And Graph Explorer, we've extended Graph Explorer, and we've added the Microsoft Search samples that I'm going to show you today. But to demo this, I'm not going to use Graph Explorer. I'm going to use Postman. So Postman is a tool that is very convenient to execute REST queries. And Jeremy Kelly, one of the Graph PM, has built a Microsoft Graph Postman Collection with a bunch of samples. So that's literally all the samples. And I'm going to use that to actually demo search. So these are the things that I'm going to show you, and I will walk you through those one by one. So let me remove this to make it a little bit bigger. OK, so first, before to make any call to Microsoft Graph, you need to get a token. So here I'm on my test tenant, and I'm getting a token. And in the token, that's the very traditional way to do graph query. So you get a token, and you specify the type of information you want to access. And before that, you need to register your app in AAD. That's something very straightforward, nothing fancy, and everything is very well documented and has been there for a long time. So what I'm showing here is the most basic query you could do. So literally, we're calling the graph.microsoft.com/beta/source/query, and we're passing a JSON body where in the body you specify the type of content you want. Here is a file message and the query string. So this is the most simple query you can execute. So when you execute this query, you get some search result back. So let me go through a little bit the anatomy of how the search response look like. So first you have the search terms that are echoed here, and you've got, this is the list of all results. So here I can see that I have one result, that there is no more available result. This is to enable some paging scenario if you want to move forward. And then you get, this is kind of the header of the search results, and I can see that the results are sorted by date time. I get a summary of the email, and then under the source node, this is where I actually have the Microsoft Graph type that you may already be using in the app. So all these properties is something you should be familiar with if you're already a Microsoft Graph developer. So you can see that in this example is very simple, but doesn't add much to what the other email search powers, because results are sorted by date. So there's not much intelligence in that. So I'll show you another example where today we are exposing a way by providing this attribute and in the request, enable top result. What we're exposing is we're exposing a feature that is available in Outlook. So when you go in Outlook, it's deployed on OAuth. In Outlook desktop, it's running out. But there's a feature when you search, there is a UX treatment where you get top results. The reason is in email that's traditionally been sorted by date, and it's great. We get used to it. But sometimes you may be polluted with content that is not really relevant. So we are exposing top results, the three top most relevant emails. So when you, and we've mimicked that behavior in this API. So when you execute this query, you get a bunch of results, and actually what you get is the first results, the three first results are sorted by relevance, and the rest of the results are sorted by date. So this is one of the examples where we are starting to surface some intelligence in this API that is not available in any other endpoint. There's also a searching calendar event, which is exposed. I will not deep dive too much into this one. This one is pretty straightforward. So let me move now to things that we also already know, which is files. So when you execute a file query, you, again, specify what type of content you want. Here I'm specifying I want a drive item. I get a list of results. What do I get more when I use this API? The thing you get is you get something that looks like this. So this list in Microsoft Search, when you go in and pivot by file search, give me files. This is the list of results in Microsoft Search. This is consistent with what the new API is giving. This is not the list of files that is returned by the SharePoint API. The SharePoint API is a bare-bone relevance. It's mostly using term frequency to power relevance, which is kind of old school and doesn't provide very good reasons in terms of relevance. In the Microsoft Search middle tier, we've improved that, and this is where we use the signal of who are your colleagues, how fresh are these documents, have they been shared with you. This intelligence is showing up here, and this intelligence is showing up in the endpoint I've been showing you. OK, so let me now switch to connectors. I will just show you here. This is the admin UX, where you can actually, as a tenant admin, configure the type of data source you want to ingest. So here on that tenant, I have ingested two external data sources. One is file share. We've ingested external file share. To do this, you need to set up an Azure gateway, the same one as the Power BI gateway, to be able to get into your data center, into your premise. And the second one is ServiceNow. So I have set up two connectors. So the data now is in the Microsoft Search index. So I want to show you how this works at the API level. So for files, so these are files indexed from a file share. Here I specify the type of entity, which is a new type we've introduced in Graph, external file. Why is it a new type? It's a file, but it's different from drive item, because the drive item is a file in Microsoft 365. So you can search, and you can do details call, you can enumerate properties. This file is not in Microsoft 365. So It cannot, by essence, be a drive item. That's why we've introduced this. We've been introducing this new type of external file. So when you execute this query, you're getting results, and in the results, you see the external file. An external file is a specific, as a limited set of properties, very basic, a title, a URL, a name, an extension, and a size. And this is what you've been feeding from the connector. So since an external file is a file, and drive items are files, we've made sure that you can query files. Because in this scenario, the end user doesn't know where the file is. It may be in M365 on SharePoint, on OneDrive, but it might also be on a file share. The user doesn't know. So you are able here to specify two different types of entities. Give me external file and give me drive items. And here, when you run this query, you're getting files coming all across the two different sources. So here, you can see that I have some drive items. And if I go later in the list, you can see that you have some external files. So this is a blend of external and files stored in Microsoft 365. The SharePoint UX is, the Microsoft UX, SharePoint UX on files vertical is actually doing the same. They're blending external and internal files. So the last demo I want to show is about external items. So these are external items. These are, we talked about ingesting ServiceNow content. So these are not files. This is completely unstructured entities that you specify when you configure your connection. So when you configure your connection, you say, oh, I want to index a ticket in ServiceNow. You specify the schema. You do this with the admin. And then here what I'm showing is you specify the entity type you want. You specify the name of the connection, because you may be ingesting different types. So you need to specify which connection it is. And this is defined in the tenant admin. And then you specify the field you need. And when you run this query, you're getting results. And each result is here. And it's actually a bunch of property bag with the properties I've been specifying here. This is just to give you a sense, if you go here, and I go in the ServiceNow vertical, this list is the same as the previous list you've seen. And this is actually being configured through the admin UX. OK, I'm going back to the slides. OK. Oops. OK, so what are the key integration scenarios? So what can I do with this API? So the first thing you can do is build custom web part in SharePoint. And here I'm showing you the example from a partner we've been working with, Ration. They have actually built this particular web part that is getting data in a customer dashboard view. So that's one integration scenario. And then we will see this scenario in one of the sessions later today. The other scenario is the same partner has an existing app, which is not in Microsoft technology. It's a Java app build and the UX build on top of React and React Native, React. And this is a very good example where you can access from the graph. That's the promise of the Microsoft Graph API. You can access the data from anywhere. So that's the second example. And the third example is one of the key scenarios. You ingest data in the index, and you want to access this data and to surface this data into your application. OK, so what is can I search across multiple entities? Today, you've seen in the demo that the only scenario where you can search across multiple entities is drive item and external items, because these are files. We may be bringing more cross-entity queries. So the example I took was around email message and Teams conversation. That things may be coming. And we will see opportunistically what cross-entity scenarios are coming by GA. Can I get everything currently exposed in the Microsoft Search experience? That's a question we get a lot. When people go in Microsoft Search and Bing, they see some things that is not exposed in the API. There are some known gaps today. Over time, we will fill in this gap, and we are planning to expand our coverage. So what is coming soon for build? So first thing we want to do is we are currently in beta. So it means the API may change a little bit when we're in beta. That's the downside of it. We want to transition from beta and release it into the 1.0. The second thing we want to do is we want to bring more content type. So the content type that are actually on the table are Teams content, conversation, message. That's the big one. The second one is Streams Video. There's another one also that is on the table, is bringing more SharePoint items. So list item is not currently surfaced in the API. We've gotten feedback of, oh, this is a bummer. We need list item to surface, and this is something we are considering adding. So that's from the content type perspective. And the last aspect is from a search capability perspective. We've heard loud and clear that refiners is something that is not exposed today in the API, and that's something that our customers want. And also, we don't have the ability to define the type of sorting. So we want to offer this flexibility to enable you to sort by something else, by a custom property, sort by author, for example. OK, so what's the call to action is try it out. So it's public. All the examples I've been showing today are available on the Graph Explorer, are available in the documentation. Get in touch during Ignite. So I will be on the 2 other sessions, and we can talk a little bit today. If you have feedback, please send the feedback on Stack Overflow. That's kind of the place in the Graph community where we collect feedback. So there is a specific tag on Microsoft Search where you can provide your feedback. And these are the 2 related sessions that are coming right now. The first one is building your own connector. Raju will walk you through how to build your own connectors if you have your own line of business app. And the second one is around what are the type of search customization you can do primarily from the SharePoint perspective. Thank you for your attention.